Sorry, just making sure. Someone says no sound. Maybe now we have sound.
How about now? Yeah, see.
Can you hear us now online? Thumbs up.
Rick Craig, your Chief Financial Officer.
Dramatic pause.
Still done.
Sure.
April Holland.
Corey Grogan, Public Information.
Amanda Makepeace, recorder today.
Eric Miley, Board's office.
And is there anybody online that wishes to introduce themselves?
Jeff Van Arsdal, Benton County Sheriff.
Oh, our very quiet sheriff.
Arlene Merrim.
My sound not working?
Uh-oh, we can't hear you, Sheriff,
Perfect.
again.
Arlene Merrims is online too.
Yes. All right. I think there's maybe a sound problem.
So Arlene, I think that we need to ask you to unmute yourself from your end, please. Thank you.
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you here. Okay, so the sheriff can hear, but we can't hear in the room.
Yeah, there was a little bit of echo.
Sorry about that.
Speaker.
Arlene, we can see you, but we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
We're not getting sound,
I can hear you.
but you can hear us.
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Maybe it's not her.
She says she can hear us. We
Yeah,
just can't hear.
I know.
Yeah, okay,
But maybe it's not her.
all right.
All right, we'll continue to try to figure out our technical glitch. Are there any announcements this morning? Hearing none, review and approve our agenda. Are there any changes? Hearing none, we'll get into our discussion topics, discussion regarding the exotic animal ordinance. Tommy Douglas.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Buttons on, is that correct, Amanda? Am I good?
If you can see our green, there should be some sound. Yes, I'm hopeful anyway.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. As you know, we've been having an ongoing conversation about the existing exotic and wild animal ordinance, or as we call it in my house, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. Today is an opportunity for you all to have a conversation together. And to really give us some direction moving forward about what you would like to do, if you want to keep the ordinance, amend, repeal, what those decisions moving forward would be, and maybe have some conversations about a couple, I think, items. There was one that Commissioner Weston put out about the actual exemption of the Benton County Fair. That was one question that some folks had. We wanted to, there's two main areas in the draft revision that we discussed. One was changing the animal names from the Latin taxonomy, which was confusing and difficult for some folks, and translating that to plain English. And then the exempted organizations, making it clear that FFA and 4-H events would be exempted from this ordinance so that normal activities can happen at the fairgrounds. There was a request that we specifically call out Benton County Fair, both by the Fair Board and staff, that we just specifically call that as a specifically exempted event. Just honestly to assure our community that there was no intent for this ordinance to harm the fair. And I think that's one area of contention that we want to talk a little bit about today and what that would mean or any ramifications. But otherwise, I'm here to just help steer the conversation and provide any helpful info and take direction as to what we want to do next.
I printed out my, edits to the
Awesome.
one that I emailed to
Yes.
you, but I left them in my office. My bad.
You want
Yes, if you guys want to start talking. I'll just-
Sure.
Yeah, I might have them actually. Oh,
Use the time to organize my paperwork.
yeah, the copy here.
Is on our way. Sounds like gonna be something real silly if that. Cause everything be fun. We are having an issue where folks online we can hear them, but they can't hear, or no, they can hear us, but we can't hear them.
In this brief break, I'd like to acknowledge how beautiful the new signs look.
I'm just taking.
I think those look very nice. Thank you, Corey.
Yes.
They look great on camera too, I noticed. It's good. Good addition. Sir.
So I guess to start, I thought we could remove the third whereas.
Yes. That was one that we had circulated amongst the group, and I heard back from Commissioner Ojo that she was comfortable with striking it, and I believe I heard from Commissioner Malone as well. And I think that was one that we were all, and I thought that was a great and a good concession to the Fair Board, who felt that a lot of the language was just overly harsh and not relevant.
Yeah, that's my feeling, is that it was just overly harsh, and that, the next paragraph touches on the protection of the workers and the public, so.
Right, exactly. Perfect.
Then. Yes, so I guess I just wanted to better understand what the pros and cons or the implication would be of exempting the Benton County Fair. If there isn't wild animal acts at the Benton County Fair, then why do we need to call it out? Is there any unintended consequences of putting that in? That's my question.
And I think that there's some question, just some clarification around fair and fairgrounds, which I think exempting the fair is right and proper and includes all those 4-H and FFA events, and feels like this is our community event that we want to make sure is allowed to remain unchanged. And also the message to the community that we care about the Benton County Fair, and this was never the intention to harm the fair, right? Fairgrounds is a different question though. And I think that is absolutely a right and proper application of an ordinance like this, that a traveling circus act couldn't come in to the Benton County Fairgrounds. So that's why I felt and staff felt like Benton County Fair, super comfortable with, that feels right. Fairgrounds, then then that's way too big of an umbrella of protection and could in the future allow some events that we don't want to have happen out there. So, that was the thought around that exemption.
My question there is that what are the bounds of the fair? Because the exhibit hall at the fair has in the past hosted traveling exotic animal purveyor, I don't know what to call them, exhibitor, that definitely was one of the reasons for this original ordinance.
Yeah.
And then the skate tank was another example of the fair contracting with an exhibitor that was exhibiting animals in a way that was frankly lethal to the animals over time. And with this ordinance. So that's my only concern. Would we still allow those kinds of things in there? I would-
Well, it's not about allowing, it would have to be us to book them in the future,
Yes.
right? And which we are not doing and would not do. And we can codify also in our administrative practices, which is actually something we might want to do anyway. Regardless, just put it in our administrative rules that we don't allow circuses and, you know, just as a second layer of protection. But the fair itself, and we are the fair, as long as the fair is being ran by the county, you know, in the future, if you were to subcontract it out or, you know, or it would become property of a volunteer group or something, you know, I can't talk about what that future would look like. But as long as it's the fair, there's no them. It's all us booking those acts and then 4-H and FFA bringing their animals. And you know what I mean? I don't, there's no crack there for folks to bring in an act that wouldn't be specifically contracted by us. Which would go through, you know, also goes through a county attorney's office. So he sees all the contracts for everything we contract for fair. So that's another double layer of protection where he would be like, this doesn't seem, the whale shark spectacular at the fair doesn't seem to be traditional. Let's talk about that. But, you know, but that's also something, you know, I would be happy to do is look at administrative rules around the fairgrounds and tighten those up. Because I think that's, yeah, another good
So I
place.
think without having something very specific in writing somewhere, I wouldn't want to move forward. Just saying, well, we know not to book those people because that just doesn't seem like the right way to do it. And then you have people saying, well, I don't see anything in your ordinance or in your rules that says we can't. So why are you, you know, discriminating against me or?
But we
something?
would have an ordinance. I mean, right? We would have an
Okay,
ordinance.
if we adopt this ordinance, then it gives us legs to stand on.
So, for example, if in the future, somebody wants to book some kind of exotic, you know, animal, something at the fair, at the Benton County Fair, you know, a booth during fair time, this exempts it, so they technically would be able to do that. So would you, then that
I
puts.
mean, operationally, that's not possible, but I understand what you're saying. Like from a policy perspective, in theory, yes. But we're the ones who we go out and we book acts specifically ourselves. We're proactive around.
What about in 20 years from now, maybe none of us are around and it's like, well, why do we just have this sort of way of doing things that's not codified anywhere? Why aren't we booking exotic animals if it's exempted from the ordinance and we don't have it written anywhere else?
Yeah. I don't know how to answer 20 years from now questions, unfortunately, because I think.
Well, my job is to think about right now and in the
Yeah.
future. So I'm just, as one.
No, I understand. That's why I'm like, can we put it in administrative rules too, right? So that there's actual fairgrounds operations rules that prohibit this kind of activity as well. If we want to continue to keep, you know, fair out as an exempted event, that's obviously this commission's, you know, purview, and we can do that. I'm saying we can also back it up too, so that there are less opportunities for it to slip through the cracks either way.
So what I would like is, yes, us to have the right information in here that we all feel comfortable with, and then also have it backed up. My fear is that if we say, yes, we're going to someday get to putting it into our rules or our administrative, whatever policy, but we don't actually when is that actually going to get done? I would feel good about making sure that it actually gets done. Does that make sense? Like, oh, we're just going to put it on the list of things to do, but when are we going to get around to actually doing it?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I don't think there's at this point, any rush to necessarily decide today, but to get some direction. And it would be helpful to me anyway to at least have an outline of policy going forward that ordinance would back up, or vice versa, that a policy would back up the ordinance and say how that would affect the Benton County Fair, and defining the fair. Would it help if we put the annual Benton County Fair, or if you put dates in there inaccurate, but so that we're we're clear what we're talking about, some kind of definers around the county fair.
Mhm. I don't know, is that,
I,
what do you all think about that?
I mean, at this point, I'm not comfortable just exempting the Benton County Fair because I don't feel comfortable enough to just do that without, I don't know what the possible implications are. Seems more difficult to start trying to define them and think of all the what ifs than just not exempt it.
Mhm.
I would agree.
The reality is 4-H and FFA events does cover a majority of things that happen at the fair, not inclusive. I mean, there's some things that it does not cover specifically, but none of the prohibited animals should be involved, so it shouldn't be an issue, right? Like that's the other thing. It's not just exempted events, but simply like without the presence of those animals, we don't even get into the territory of exotic or wild animal, right? So.
It's the exhibit hall and other
Mhm.
entertainments that go along with the 4-H component of the fair
Mhm.
that are I'm concerned about
Mhm.
talking about exempting the fair.
Mhm.
And so I'm uncomfortable with that because we've already seen that there's been confusion in the past about those activities at the
Mhm.
fair. And I'd like our policy to be as clear as possible and not have to have Vance interpret things.
Mhm.
But have it very understandable for everyone, including all potential exhibitors.
Okay, okay, that's.
At least some of the confusion came from the original ordinance. My understanding came from the Animal Defenders International. And I appreciate the effort to make this specific to Benton County and make sure it works for us.
So if I can just jump in for a moment, I know that Tommy had suggested a policy that could give assurance to the board and the community and to vendors about what was and what will be and what would not be permitted at the fair, the 4-day, 5-day fair event. If that is a direction that you'd like Tommy to at least present as an option for you, I would suggest that a policy be created that must be both approved by the Board of Commissioners and the Fair Board, because many policies are approved by the departments. And for this kind of a topic, I think it sounds like the board would like to have a say. And that'd be really, I think, beneficial to everybody for the Fair Board and the Board of Commissioners to be on the same page with that kind of policy. So
I would be comfortable with an exemption language in the ordinance if we had that policy in place.
And I would be too. It's just it's a lot of extra work, and do we actually need it if we just don't exempt it in the policy? So this has already gotten way more complicated, I think, than it needs to, and we've kept kicking the can down the road for a very long time. I would just like to adopt something and be good with it and move on.
I could double down with Vance and we can draft a policy very quickly. I mean, I just, and do it in tandem, just saying, if we want to keep things moving to your point, right? Like, I think we can do it all.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your willingness to do that.
Of course, no, I want to do, right, we want to do this right. I don't want us to have this conversation every 4 years or whatever, like, let's do this right. And I think if we, sorry, Vance, hi, are you available to work on a policy with me over the next week?
sure, I don't want to do it every 4 years though.
There you go, we're in this together.
Preference would be not to exempt.
Same.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's okay, in my opinion, to include rodeo in here. Because as you said, they don't use exotic animals in the rodeo. And FFA, do we want to call out? Is it just commonly known as FFA, or do we want to call out Future Farmers of America?
We can spell it out if you'd like, but it's known. I mean, I think they've even stopped using the future spelling it out. I think they use it more as an acronym now than anything, but I can double check on that.
That's great then.
I will. Yeah, let me see.
And then I know one of the other concerns was the actually having teeth, having a impacts, so the fine. And then I think you sent an email saying, what's the appropriate amount?
I just thought if we're gonna look at it, let's look at it. And when I was looking at comparative fees and the relative scale of, if folks are gonna be abusing this ordinance, they're gonna have to try pretty hard and they're gonna probably be doing it for high stakes, right? It's gonna be a financial and economic, there's gonna be economic reasons for them to ignore the ordinance and work around it. So I would say let's hit them where that matters.
So this copy says 500 and 1,000. Do you feel comfortable that that's a good amount, or you suggest going higher, or?
I would defer to Vance what's consistent with.
Yeah, this is exactly spot on with all of our other enforcement fine amounts.
Mm.
So it is very consistent with the rest. And I'm a strong advocate for that, maintaining consistency, so our animal control officer doesn't have to go back and check each specific section of the code if she writes a citation.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think the other, so on page 1, 2, 3, under 2B, I crossed out the word legitimate just because I think licensed or accredited for academic research, education, et cetera. I think that covers it. I just,
Yeah, it does. It does. And we had been missing just the straight word education on its own. And that's the thing, like, there are some groups that don't quite fit some qualifications, but have awesome missions and do wonderful work and are, licensed by nationally licensed, but not state. So I wanted to allow us some leeway to be like, no, obviously this is a school group who's, not licensed because it's a school, right? But they would have some, yeah. But legitimate was just to support that, and I can see how that could be manipulated, so that makes sense to strike that.
So if I understand where the board is trending on this topic, it is to take Commissioner Wise's amendments in section 9.810 subsection 2B, return rodeos as an exempted activity. The rest of Commissioner Wise's intent.
so I would say we exempt 4-H rodeos and FFA.
So we return rodeos to the list.
Yes.
But we keep the fair out.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. It does, you're right, it is underlined or crossed out. I think I got a little highlight happy.
Where,
It's on the last page.
I don't know, does that make sense considering that the rodeo is part of the Benton County Fair? Do we have rodeos that are not part of the Benton County?
Well,
Fair?
that was kind of, honestly, I'd like to connect it to the fairs, because the rodeos associated with the fairs, I think should be included. But renter rodeos, like those that just come through town, I think they should be upheld to the rest of the ordinance, honestly. They might be the ones to bring in random animals, and not every rodeo is produced by us. Local rodeos, our rodeo committee, that's a whole different thing than the National Professional Commercial Rodeo Circuit, which is not, doesn't have,
We could say county rodeo.
yes, or their affiliated 4-H FFA and their affiliated rodeos or something like that, but, or county affiliated, or I can workshop that a little bit.
We can massage.
Yeah, I'm sure you have an idea how to do it, Vance, but yeah, I would like that. There's some other kinds of rodeos I don't know that we want to give.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Thank
That's
you.
for those unintended consequences.
Yep.
I'm just.
Yep. That's what I was just, if you saw that look, that's what it was me being like, okay, we do need a little finer point on rodeos, I think. Uh-huh.
And then how do you two feel about taking out the third whereas?
I'm fine, Goes into the sewer. It's not like,
Mhm.
But we're already anyway, so.
no heartburn.
We already have the
Goal, right? Be good, no heartburn. Okay.
so the main change from this draft, Nancy's draft, is taking out the Benton County Fair.
Mhm.
I like to be that.
Okay.
And, or leave that open till we see the policies.
I think two of us don't want a policy. Well,
just want to have it clear in the ordinance. And not have to have a second
Mhm.
layer.
Hear that? Okay.
Okay, so at this juncture, everything that Commissioner Wise has presented, except for rodeos, which will have a clarifying
Mhm.
adjective
Mhm.
added to it, will be presented as proposed ordinance, and then, of course, you guys can discuss it at the time. And certainly, Commissioner Malone, you guys can chat about it now. But I'm hearing two wish not to have the fairgrounds exempted. Yep, sorry.
Event, not the place. Event, not the
Words
place.
matter.
Yep, yes, they do. In this one, they do.
And you would prefer to have the fair exempted.
Yes.
So I think that's if you guys wish to have a conversation about that, probably now is a good time to do that.
I've already stated my opinion and given specific examples. Same.
I guess my concern is just confusion. I appreciate getting Latin translated into English. I do remember the stingray problem a few years back, and I think, Zan, there's some evidence to the contrary that that is not lethal to the stingrays.
Not in the near term, but I can't imagine that being touched by hundreds of people over a period of days is not lethal to fish that are not, that's not what they're built for. And there are contaminants on people's hands, and disease inevitably affects them.
Do you have any
There is,
basis?
I think we could go to OSU into the aquaculture, the exotic fish folks there. There are specialists that are specialists in fish diseases, and we could get proof, but I don't have it here in my hand. No.
It's, I don't have proof either, but just lived experience of someone using several fish tanks and little fish babies.
I think I have a study that says that's not the case. But I'm absolutely not claiming to be an expert, but just that kind of, I guess the problem I had with what happened there is the exhibit was already here, like on Monday, and then the objection, I mean, it was advertised, it was in the literature, and the complaint didn't come up till the exhibit was in town.
That's what we're trying to clarify by putting everything in plain English so that we don't have that problem again. And we also need processes at the fair in order to make sure that fair staff share the ordinance with any potential exhibitor and that fair staff understand the ordinance. That was an example of lack of appropriate process to implement the ordinance. So it was very unfortunate.
We have processes now. Everyone's informed about the ordinance, sent a copy of it, asked to acknowledge and initial that they see it, especially anyone that has anything animal related. If they have a circus or an active group, we make them, or we even get them on the phone and be like, no animals, right? Okay, but but the current ordinance, yes, is difficult to enforce because specifically of the Latin and the fact that staff aren't always trained to be able to identify etymology. So yes, but since the ordinance was passed, we have put processes in place to let folks know that that simply isn't, kind of events that we book here. That said, there's still more we can do, and we can outline exactly what we're okay with and what we aren't in our policies and practices, for sure.
And I hope going forward, we can get away from the adversarial roles that have been taken on this. I'm honestly familiar with the 4-H folks, and I don't think anybody wants to mistreat animals.
Correct.
So, I hope we can make that clear in our ordinance.
I think that's the one thing we're in violent agreement about, right? We all want to take care of animals.
Yep, and no one's accusing FFA or 4-H of doing anything abusive towards animals. That's not, was never the intent. It's never been spoken. It's not part of anything that we are trying to do.
Understood.
All right.
I think the question though is this an amendment or is this a new ordinance that you would like?
Oh, you might.
I believe that, okay.
It's
You-
it's an amendment, but it's got to come through an ordinance, so we will work together to come up with a ordinance and the red line version, and we'll schedule it for a board. It'll be a public.
This is an amendment to
hearing.
the existing.
Yes, yeah.
Just be clear, our intention is still not to repeal the old ordinance until we have the new one ready to go. Do that at
Correct,
the
and
same
and
time.
that happens simultaneously.
It is absolutely in effect.
Just want to call it out, so.
And so the process is that the ordinance will be prepared, there will be a public hearing, draft ordinance will be in the packet, so the community members can all see it in advance and absorb what's there. They can come and speak to us at that time, we will deliberate again, and then we have a first reading. And then it's not confirmed then, it comes back for a second reading if we vote in favor of it. And so the process is what will take the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, I would also just throw out the caution that it's always possible that at that first, that at the public hearing where the first reading is scheduled, you might have changes, which could then result in a continuation, and that could push the timeline out a little bit, yes, but generally speaking, 2 weeks to get something on the board calendar, public hearing, 2 weeks for the second, 30 days before it takes effect. So if things go fairly smoothly, this change will be in the Benton County Code by the first of the year, which is really, really good because that's about when you start ramping up to look for next year's booking their acts.
It's true. It's very good timing. And that gives us just enough time to work out all the policy gaps we want to deal with. If there's anything we want to, work on internally, we'll do that as well. So that when you go in, we'll have, refreshed whatever policies we need to. And I think we want to do some specific exemptions about circuses, just to make it clear. But do it. Thanks, everyone.
Looking forward to getting this settled. So we can move on. Appreciate the timeline.
Yeah.
Advance, that seems, I mean, even if there's a slight delay, we're still on track. In place by the first of the year. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Next up. Equity, diversity and inclusion program update. Laura Siddiqui.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you so much for having me here today. I have a presentation that I believe is about to get streamed, so we can all have something to look at. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. All right, so I want to, before I start, just preface this by saying I am nervous. My nose is sweating already, and I apologize in advance if I stutter or say a lot. I think the last time I was here, that happened. I listened to my recording and I counted the amount of times I said so I will make an effort not to do that this time. But thank you so.
We're all our own worst critics, okay? I do it too, so don't even worry.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So Equity, Diversity, Inclusion at Benton County. This is just an overview of the current EDI program at Benton County. There is a lot for me to talk about today, and unfortunately, I will be doing a lot of the talking. However, this will not be the only time you hear from me. I will be joining you on a quarterly basis so that you have a lot more opportunity to provide feedback and input, and we can go into things in a lot more detail. So the next slide, please. Thank you. And if there's a clicker, if you want me to do that, I'm happy to. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so since this is the first presentation I'm giving to the Board of Commissioners, I'd like to start with some of the basics first. I can't talk to you about equity, diversity, inclusion at the county without us understanding what those terms mean in the first place. So having a basic understanding of these terms will help make the rest of this presentation make sense. And I also think it's a good place to start so that we're all on the same page using the same vocabulary. You'll also see principles of diversity, inclusion, and equity woven through the work and the projects that you see later in the presentation. And these specific terms really help establish why we're doing this at the county and why it's so important. So for the first term, diversity, this is actually part of my new hire orientation training when new hired staff joined the organization. We hear the term diversity, inclusion, equity so often, but we don't really, what does that really mean? We hear it together, we don't really know what they mean on an individual basis. So diversity is the most basic term. It's something that we heard a lot when this topic was becoming more commonplace in government institutions. Diversity is a very static term, though. It's just about the representation of different cultures and social backgrounds. So when we look at the room today, there's diversity within this room, but it's static. There's nothing happening outside of that. It's solely about the representation. Inclusion is more of the action. Inclusion is the action of ensuring that everyone in that room is represented, but also supported and has equal value and opportunity to provide input for decisions, any decision-making, and collaborative efforts. Now, equity is a great word. We hear it used so often, and oftentimes it's used interchangeably with the word equality, but those two terms cannot be more different from each other. They don't mean the same thing at all. So when I think about the word equity, I think about the word access, and I'm just going to plant that in everyone's brain because that's going to come up a lot during the presentation today. Equity cannot be achieved until the unique barriers are addressed and removed for specific individuals and specific communities. Equality is when, let's say I get the same, I get a $20 bill, and Rick is, since you're in finance, you get a $20 bill. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we have the same opportunities because of other barriers that we may experience. Okay, next slide, please.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The diversity definition, doesn't it specifically include gender or ability in this definition?
Absolutely.
We want it to be broader.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So thank you for that call out. So oftentimes when we hear diversity, we think about it only in reference to race or ethnicity. Diversity applies to diversity in abilities, diversity in language, diversity in socioeconomic status, in housing status. And so when I think of the word diversity, it means variation across all categories for all human beings. It's not only referring to ethnicity or race. And I can expand on that more, but there's actually more I'll be digging into later in the presentation about that. So this is an image I don't know how many of us have seen this, but this has gone around a lot the last few years. On the left hand, you can see the word equality. That's where you see each individual having the same resource, the same box to stand up on, so they have access to the game. But as you can see, they don't all have equal access to the game, even though they all received a box to stand on. Equity is when you not only have the resource you need to access a game, but everybody has the opportunity to view it the same way as a person next to them. And so when I think about equity, a really easy way for us to kind of decipher the difference between equity and equality is really about removing barriers. It's about improving access. Next slide, please. Okay, so I apologize, the, the text on this slide is really small. So I'm including this slide because it's important to establish the why. Why do we even have equity, diversity, inclusion program at the county? Why do we even have a coordinator at Benton County? So the EDI program started in 2021. It started very recently. It's a very new program. The individual that filled this position before me in 2021 was here for about a year and a half and did an exceptional job at getting it standing on four legs. So Benton County itself, as we all know, is an incredibly diverse community. It's constantly growing and evolving. And it's important that the county recognizes the different ways our community is diverse. And so this list that you see on this slide is not encompassing every single thing. It's just a preliminary idea about how diverse our county is. So when we look at this first bullet here, it says languages. I will go a lot more into depth later in the presentation about languages and language access for the county. But within the county, we have, outside of English, 5 commonly spoken languages. Primarily, we see the spoken language of Spanish, which is also very specific because there's so many dialects of Spanish. It's also very important to have the appropriate language services for that as well. We often see Spanish that is the Mexican and US dialect. We see the language of MAM, which is M-A-M. Oftentimes when I say this out loud, people think I'm saying Hmong, which is H-M-O-N-G, which is spoken in East Asia. MAM, M-A-M, is spoken, it's a Mayan language that's spoken by indigenous people in western and northern highlands of Guatemala and in southwest Mexico. And that is what we're seeing a lot more often here within our community, especially in the health side. It is a growing population in our community, and we're seeing a higher need. We also see the languages of Chinese, Korean, Arabic, and Thai. But like I said earlier, this is not a cohesive list. So I do, for example, language line invoicing, and I can see different languages that are used by our staff at the health department, or different interpreters that are used by staff at the health department. And so I've seen Punjabi, Ukrainian. There's several that aren't listed here that are definitely seen by staff at the county. Diversity, I'm also talking about rural and urban diversity. So the people who are in a rural community are going to have very different needs than people in our urban community. There's definitely going to be overlap there and similar needs, but when you think about equity, when it comes to rural communities, one of the barriers that, for example, some individuals in our community may experience is access to transportation, access to internet or working internet and Wi-Fi. These are barriers that we need to consider, and we're considering everyone in our community. Races and ethnicities. So this is all the data that you see in this bullet point is spoken with the caveat that, yes, this is data taken about our demographics from the US Census Bureau, but that's with the caveat that we can strive for data objectivity, but oftentimes this information is underreported for various reasons. So as you can see, we have a current population, the majority is 86% white or Caucasian. We also have representation from the Hispanic Latino community, 2 or more races, Asian, Black, African American, American Indian, Native American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander. The numbers you see here under race and ethnicity in our county are skewed because of a number of reasons, though. Demographic data is underreported because sometimes community members don't feel comfortable sharing that information for various reasons. And then there's also because some folks are unsure of what to select for themselves. And a good example of that is actually something I mentioned, I learned recently, but I also mentioned in the communications that went out last week for Hispanic American Heritage Month. The option to select Hispanic or Latino on the Census Bureau didn't exist until the 1970s. And that wasn't until the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund lobbied the federal government to include that category in the census. And so this is also a barrier that people in the Arab community often encounter because there are different races within the Arab community. And I say races as something very different than ethnicities. So that's another reason why sometimes this information gets skewed and isn't the most representative of how accurate a community looks. When I talk about diversity, I'm also talking about people with disabilities, people who have developmental disabilities, physical, mental illness, chronic illness, and other invisible disabilities as well. Benton County is such a unique place because for so many reasons, but also when I think about the ages of people who live in the county, we do have a higher number of people who are 65 and older in our county, but we also have Oregon State University smack dab in the middle of Corvallis. And so we have a lot of younger folks living in the community as well. And then other identities, we have people who are part of the LGBTQIA community, different genders, religions, socioeconomic status, veteran status, marital housing, the list goes on. So again, just to drive that point home, when I mentioned the word diversity, I'm talking about a lot of different factors. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so before I dig into different projects under the EDI umbrella, I also just want to add that the demographic information is important because these are not just people in our community, these are people in our workforce. So we're not just serving people in our community, we're also serving people that we work with. So EDI at Benton County, all right. Currently, what I'm going to do is give you just an overview of all the different things. I'll also dig into, after this part of the presentation, what's currently being worked on and what is up and coming. This is not stuff, all the stuff I'm about to present to you is impossible for me to do alone every day because it's a lot of work. And so oftentimes this work happens in collaboration with a lot of folks across the county, and a lot of things I've also had to take a pause so that I can focus on urgent needs that are coming up. So when I first started at the county, which was in December, it has not been a full year yet, but I'm coming up there and it's passing by so fast. Is language services. That was a huge need that I understood that the county had. When I first started, we already had a contract with a provider by the name of Linguava, and the staff members who worked on this, including the previous EDI coordinator, put in hours and hours and hours of research and work into not only finding the best potential language service contractor for the county, but also doing an RFP to find other potential providers. Without that work, we would not be where we are now. And so currently what we have is we completed that first pilot year with Linguava. We through that process of having a language service provider, we understood even better the gaps in service and the needs that were not being met for our community. Because of that, we decided to transition from Linguava and expand our language services. So one of the primary needs we were having, for example, especially in the health department, is in-person appointments that were being missed, specifically for folks who needed an interpreter. That is something that, even though we are not doing that, our contractor represents the county, and it represents the work we're doing and how we're meeting needs. And so we decided to contract with two separate providers who provide in-person interpretation services. Tri-County ASL Interpreters can provide interpreters for ASL within 48 business hours, which is amazing. We also have professional interpreters for any other language that we need in-person interpreting for, and Language Line Solutions, which is our newest provider for translations and over the phone and video interpreting. And so within this language service contracts management, this includes creating a manual that was finalized yesterday, thank goodness, and it's uploaded and on the Bee now, which is wonderful, so folks have access to this information. We have an invoicing and billing process, training for all staff. Our first training for Language Line Solutions is actually tomorrow, which is incredibly exciting. Monitoring of the budget, and then also ensuring that I am tracking feedback in terms of, are there gaps in service that we're still seeing? Are there needs that aren't being met? What additional work do we need to do to make sure that we're doing what we can to ensure that our community is getting their needs met and our workforce has the tools they need to perform the jobs that they need to do.
So, with those interpretation and translation contracts, my understanding is that we still have staff that are doing some translation of materials as well. So how do we decide what's done internally and what's contracted?
Thank you. That's a really great question. I'm going to write this down so I don't forget what I want to say to you. And yes, okay. So we do have staff who work here at the county who sometimes will provide interpretation support and translation support. Some of these staff, I would say the majority of these staff receive, I don't know exactly what the right term is for HR, but I believe like a differential. There's a process that these specific staff members go through. It's a pretty extensive process through HR to measure their ability to provide that additional service through their positions here. However, as we've all probably experienced, when a need comes up and we don't have the time and it's urgent, like let's say there's a member of the community who comes in, but we don't, maybe there's a reason why we can't get interpreter available right in that moment. I do believe that sometimes staff have been relied on to provide interpretation or translation services in those situations. I do want to highlight the fact that that I wouldn't qualify that as best practice. I think we need to utilize our contracts and we need to utilize our employees that are receiving a differential for those services. And so I hope that clarifies your question, but I would encourage everyone at the county to really utilize our contracts and staff that are supposed to be doing that work versus staff who that's not in the position description.
Sorry.
Yes.
Would you go over, mention Tri-County?
Yeah.
American for in-person translation?
Absolutely.
And so the local people coming, being physically present to, and then Language Line Solutions is the more online remote. And those are the two services that we have currently, is that correct? And that they've replaced in Guava.
Absolutely, yeah. Those are two of three. There's a third one. So since Tri-County American Sign Language provides only interpreters for ASL, for American Sign Language, we have another contract, so the third contract with professional interpreters, which all of these organizations, by the way, are local as well. They're all Oregon-based, which is awesome. But professional interpreters provides in-person interpretation services for any other language that we would need, that we would see coming in from the community. And so those are the three. You're welcome. And I apologize, I want to make sure I'm not going to go over time too much, so I'm going to try to get through the rest of these. But please feel free to also ask questions, interrupt me at any point, and you can also pull me aside at afterwards as well to have additional conversation. The second big project is the countywide equity assessment. So this is going to be conducted hopefully before the end of the year through our contracts, likely through Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Also, I will refer to them as GARE because that's a mouthful. We have not committed to an agreement with GARE yet, or not at this point in time, because we're looking at, we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to ensure that we are conducting an equity assessment for our workplace that fits the needs of our organization. This assessment is going to require a communications plan, a data agreement that's signed by us and the contractor, and support from leadership staff. The last place I worked at, I was an employee who did take this survey. And so I did have a really unique experience with it. The organization I worked at previously, there was, and I think this is maybe not unique to Oregon in general or Benton County in general. I think this is probably a very familiar experience, but there's not a high number of other people of color at a lot of organizations here. And so there does need to be a certain amount of, consideration in the way assessments like this are handled, which is why I would like to support proceeding to go through this process with GARE, because they handle this with confidentiality, and anybody who takes the survey takes it anonymously. So your identity is protected. And the reason I'm saying that is because let's say it's a small department. In my little department that I worked at before, I was the only person of color. And so if someone was to see the results of that survey, they would probably know who answered what, because I'm the only person of color who was in that department. This countywide assessment is intended for us to gauge what the baseline is in terms of workplace culture. How comfortable do people feel? Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like they have the tools to conduct their job with an equity lens in mind? It's preliminary. It's a very, I would say, it's a first step to understanding where we need to start and what work we need to do. One of the other great aspects of this assessment is that the results are provided in a qualitative summary. They're also provided, the data is also disaggregated by race, gender, and department. For a county this large, having disaggregated data by department, I think is really important, also because of the unique work that happens in each department. And there's a lot more to come on this. This is not something that's ever going to be carried out without your knowledge, without your support, and without further communication. So I don't want this information to scare anyone as I'm presenting it. The third thing on this list is something you see from me all the time in emails. It's equity, diversity, inclusion, communications. So oftentimes it happens on a monthly basis, sometimes more than monthly, depending on what's happening. I believe this summer folks heard from me a lot because there's a lot going on this summer. But this is something that I am also currently working on improving the process for. One of the big goals we're going for at the county, especially with redoing our website, for example, is plain language. And so as I'm presenting this information to county staff, I'm also trying to take in consideration incorporating principles of plain language so that everything I'm presenting is communication that could be understood by everyone and not just a specific group of people. This communication is also important because it normalizes a conversation around equity, diversity, inclusion. It makes it less uncomfortable to talk about. That's usually the first step when it comes to EDI at any organization is, well, how do we even talk about it? I'm afraid to talk about EDI. Communicating through email, communicating in person and passing, talking with our team members, with our colleagues about it is one of the best ways to get that to get that work really started on an internal level. The education that's provided in these communications also establishes why. Why are we doing this and why is EDI even important? Okay, next slide. Thank you. Okay, so I briefly mentioned this earlier. We have a website equity and inclusivity initiative, I guess you could say, at the county. The IT folks here have been extremely open and supportive about including me and incorporating an EDI lens into our website overhaul. And so one of the things I've been doing is providing trainings along with IT staff for web editors at the county. So these are folks who are going to be editing our website, which means they're going to be updating the language, they're going to be updating the images we see on the website, they're going to be updating anything that the community is going to see first. And one of the important factors of this is the community needs to see themselves represented at the county, including on our website. So does a community member come to our website and see, oh yes, I can request this information in the language that I need? Does a community member come to our website and say, oh wow, I didn't know that they had this, they created this accessibility feature for me. There's a lot of different things our website can do to communicate with our community that they belong here and that we are here in service to them. And so that's been a really interesting and wonderful project to work on. The language access disclaimer is another project I'm working on with the communications team here at the county. And this is something we're going to create an internal operations guide for in terms of how to use this at the county, because we want to put a disclaimer on our website. We want to have a language access disclaimer on the footer of our website. So when folks come to our website, they know immediately that we have the tools to serve them. We also want any informational material that goes out to the public, any outreach materials, to be accessible by community members in the language that's most accessible for them as well. So the third thing on this list is something that has been in conversation with the Equity Committee. It is not something that has been pushed forward yet. It is simply a process that's been started in terms of discussion, really early stages. The restroom access policy. So this work has been spearheaded by the Developmental Diversity Manager, Jasper Smith. I do not like to take credit for the amazing work that he has already begun and conducted. A lot of upcoming work is going to be revolving around the restroom access policy. And one of the biggest reasons this is something that's on the radar is because I've noticed since I've started, a lot of times I'll have a plan for what I want to do with the EDI program, but then a need will be raised that is urgent and important that I'll need to address, and this is one of those things. So the restroom access policy isn't just about the workforce, staff who need access to different restrooms for different reasons. It's also about our community members who come here and whether or not they feel welcomed at the county. And when I say restroom access, I'm not only referring to transgender individuals, I'm referring to people who have disabilities, who require more space and more capacity. I'm referring to individuals who need a caretaker, individuals who require a private lactation room, and individuals who may require privacy or space for other needs and services. And so there will be a lot more to come on that. Next slide, please. Yes.
Language access disclaimer. To me, disclaimer means fine print and kind of restricting is what you described as
Okay.
the opposite.
Okay.
And I'm not a language expert, but I can change that one.
Thank you. No, you're not the first person who mentioned that to me. It's just one of those things that we've been calling it, but I appreciate that. We'll find a different word for it because you're right, disclaimer is probably not the accurate word. Yeah. Thank you. All right, so language services policy. This is stuff we've been talking about. It's not something that's been pushed forward. The language services aspect of this work is, well, let me go back actually for a second. There are already federal and state mandates that we're following. And so a language services policy would simply be something that falls into line into work that's already being done and has already been done. The reason why something like a language services policy is important work for the EDI program to be doing and for the equity committee to be doing is because when there's a change in leadership or whenever there's a change in management, sometimes important work like language services can fall short. And one of the examples of that is this work was started by the previous EDI coordinator and I believe another staff member in the BOC office. But as soon as those positions were vacated, this kind of fell and went missing, and I had to locate and find information to figure out where to start this over again. But the reason why this is so important is because, one, we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, and we also want to make sure we're continuing to meet community needs despite change in leadership, despite positions being vacated or refilled by different folks. This policy is going to support language access for our diverse community, and it also just mimics similar work that's already been done. The affirmative action plan, there's not a lot for me to elaborate for you on this. However, this is work I conducted in collaboration with Eric Wolke, who is no longer here, but he was the HR assistant director. We worked together on that and on incorporating ways to talk about the affirmative action plan, including dispelling common myths around the affirmative action plan to managers at manager orientations. Eric also conducted department-specific work and data collection that went into the affirmative action plan. And beneath that, you'll see recruitment, which kind of goes hand in hand with that. This is work that I also started with Eric prior to him leaving this position. Equity committee. So as some of you know, we have the equity committee in partnership with Health in All Actions committee as well. There's a lot of overlap between these two committees. So I, as the EDI coordinator, chair this committee, and that includes creating agendas, creating a work plan, utilizing the committee to apply an equity lens on current and upcoming policy and programs across county departments, and also collaboration with the Health in All Actions committee. The equity committee has funding to support development and training. We have had a few staff go through training through the budget with the equity committee for training and development. We have a lot more training that's coming up, and I'll dig into that a little bit more. We meet every other month, and this is also the committee that is working on some more holistic policies for the county. Next slide, please. Health in All Actions Committee, I just mentioned that, so I attend this. This meets every other month, and I attend this along with several other staff that are also representative on the Equity Committee. On a quarterly basis as well, I provide new hire orientations. This is something I'm constantly working on improving, though. The longer I'm in the role, the more information is is required in this orientation presentation for new hires. One of the key aspects of these new hire orientations and onboarding process is providing new hires immediately with the information they need and the tools they need to provide services to our community members. A big piece of that is the language services aspect. I put this on here as this is going to be a big part of my role here at the county, is providing regular updates to the Board of Commissioners, ensuring you're looped into any plans, any ideas, and also any feedback I'm receiving from other folks at the county. The last thing you see on this particular list is engagement with tribal nations framework. This is simply a draft at this point in time. This framework is meant only for internal use at this point. It includes preliminary information about Oregon tribes, history, and other basic information such as what's the difference between being federally recognized versus not federally recognized. This framework is also going to include information about formalities, cultural nuances, internal operations guide to streamline our communications and collaboration with tribes. This cannot and should not move forward without proper and early collaboration with tribal nations, which is why it is absolutely only in draft form currently. A big piece of this moving forward is going to require me listening to feedback and incorporating that feedback from the very start, because true collaboration doesn't come middle or towards the end of something like this. It comes at the very beginning. And the reason why this is even started is because a lot of staff, when I first got hired, came up to me and asked me, what do I do? Where do I start? Who do I contact? And so I noticed that there was a lot of gaps of need that we didn't have. We didn't have a contact list, which we have the drafting of a contact list now. We have I got questions about, well, when do I talk to tribal nations about projects that, for example, from the health department or from NAEP, how do we incorporate things about our history in a respectful way? Not having streamlined operations for how to conduct business like this has unfortunately meant that work just hasn't been done. And so what I want to do with this framework is create an opportunity for staff to have something to rely on so they have a place to start when it comes to engaging with tribal nations. Next slide, please. Thank you. This leads me directly into the next part, which is land acknowledgements for the Board of Commissioners and countywide use. We do have a current land acknowledgement draft that is open for use for any department, for any purpose, for any committee at the county. However, that's said with the caveat that land acknowledgements are extremely important, but they're not something, that's not the only step we're supposed to be doing. Land acknowledgements are the first step of continuous collaboration with tribal nations. We've been working on ways to make land acknowledgements more intentional and meaningful at the Board of Commissioners level. And I believe that this would be something that would be really good to pair with a training that comes with tribal nations framework, engaging with tribal nations framework once that is finalized. Diversity dialogues. I have conducted one diversity dialogue so far in my role, and that occurred on June 28th for Pride Month and the Stonewall Rebellion. If anyone's interested in looking at pictures of that, they're on the V. That was a really wonderful event that promoted inclusivity and belonging at the county. Diversity dialogues was something that was stood up before I started here by Johan, by the previous EDI coordinator, and it is a really key piece for our staff as a community at Benton County to feel like they belong here, that they're acknowledged and that they're seen at the county level. We have several diversity dialogues coming up next year. We have Black History Month in February, Pride Month in June, National Hispanic American Heritage Month in September, Indigenous Peoples Day next October 2024. And then we have other EDI-related events. Example of recent one was Hispanic American Heritage event that took place on October 3rd last week. These occur periodically and as needed. Sometimes they can be paired with the proclamation readings, which I'll go into detail a little bit more in a moment. These are separate from diversity dialogues. They're a lot less formal and they're more meant for networking and gatherings. I would say this was the Diversity Dialogues event and the Hispanic American Heritage event. I had specific staff come to me who told me, like, for example, one staff came to me she said she's been here for 10+ years, and this is the first time she was ever invited to anything like a Hispanic American Heritage event. And if that says anything to me, one, it says, I'm glad that this person stayed here for 10 years. And two, it says, this is a really significant way for us to show staff that it's important that they are here, that they belong here. Next slide, please. Thank you. The proclamations. So I collaborate with the PIO and a communications team on applying an equity lens to certain proclamations. We're also working on an internal process to engage more community partners, for example, inviting them to Board of Commissioner meetings, inviting them for readings, highlighting the work they do in our community. And also, for example, in I think it was June, we had the second vice president from the NAACP come and read the Juneteenth proclamation, which was a very powerful experience. We also had our very own staff member who identifies as trans and who read the Pride proclamation. And I also believe that highlighting our own staff who have the opportunity to be part of process like that and be seen on that level is also just an incredibly helpful way to make the proclamations more meaningful at the county. I also collaborate on workplace cultural barriers as needed. I go to monthly meetings for the union. I provide EDI-related resources to staff as needed. One example of that is a staff member told me that they wanted to find a way to talk more about pronoun usage for their team. And so what I supported them with is finding some materials that they could share with their team about pronoun usage at the county. So that's one of the way I provide resources to staff in that way. Countywide training and development. This is a big piece of the work that I'm doing. It's a 600+ staff organization. It's a big project. So this is something that's been a work in progress for a while. I've been doing a lot of research in terms of which contractor would be the right fit for the county. And the right fit for the county is really important. It can't just be someone I personally think is a great provider for training and education for the county. It has to be an organization that understands our specific needs. Our county is unique, like every county in Oregon is unique. And so finding the right provider to provide training is an extensive process. We are in the process of working with Courageous Conversations and in the process of learning more about the service they provide. We are talking about training that will have the capacity of around 80 staff at the county, which is incredible. And that means that all leadership, that includes any supervisory staff, will be included in this training and education. That means the Equity Committee and Health and All Actions Committee will also be included. Courageous Conversations has worked with the 80+ staff and divided into 3 separate work groups. They also provide speakers that would be for countywide attendance. And then they also provide consultation on specific workplace issues that are unique to their place of employment. They also provide specific training for leadership and supervisory staff on EDI principles. And so I'm incredibly excited to share more information with you all about that. That is something that has taken a pause while I'm working on finalizing our language services contracts with the county. And I need to do a quick time check because I feel like I've been talking for an hour and I don't want to go over.
You do fine.
Do you find? Okay, perfect, great. Just flag it for me and I can rush through. I am getting close to the end, so.
5 or 10 minutes more.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you for that. So next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so what's happening right now? I talked a little bit about language access. I'm also working on the countywide assessment rollout, the language access. I'm not gonna say disclaimer, language access note. We'll just leave it at that, as that for now. Equity Committee and Health and All Actions Committee collaboration, proclamations work, website equity, inclusivity, and EDI communications. As you can see, there's a lot of different pieces that are floating around right now. That being said, there are things that I am prioritizing now and putting on I would not say back burner, but I'm putting on the docket for later, at a later time, when I have more capacity. Next slide, please. Language access, this just highlights some stuff I've already talked to you about. These are just existing statutes that exist federally and by state mandates as well for language access. This is not meant to scare anyone. This is just meant to show folks why this is something that we're highlighting at the county right now. Next slide, please. And this is also just preliminary information about language access. So Linguava, one of the reasons they were chosen was because we went through this extensive RFP process. We wanted a provider that fits our needs. One of the things we realized in that first year of service is that there are it's not a one size fits all situation. So language services means that we have different needs for translations versus different needs for interpreters. And this slide is really just showing you the difference of those two pieces. So when you think about translations, we're translating books, contracts, vital documents, everything on our website. There's a lot of material there. When we think about interpreters, we're talking about spoken language or sign language, medical appointments, court proceedings, conferences. There's also simultaneous interpreting versus consecutive interpreting, which requires two very different skill sets. So again, another reason why one size fits all isn't the right avenue for us and why we have 3 different contracts instead. Next slide, please. And this highlights our 3 language service contracts right now that I briefly went over earlier. Language Line Solutions, professional interpreters, and Tri-County American Sign Language. One of the reasons we went with Language Line Solutions is they also provide healthcare trained interpreters specifically. And that is a significant need we have at the county. And so they provide the phone and video interpretation service and the translation portal. The translation portal, which is really exciting, especially as we as a county are moving more towards plain language, includes a service called Clarity, which includes plain language review. They also have machine translation for emergencies. And so this is something that unfortunately we all have to think about, even though we don't like to think about it. But in the case of an emergency and we have to get information out to the public as soon as possible, we have a tool called machine translation that we could use in the case of emergencies for other languages to get information out as urgently as we need to. Next slide, please.
On that note, I think of the sheriff's office, and are they involved in this conversation?
Yes, so I did loop in the sheriff's office. They have their own language service provider for their needs. And so it's actually indicated in the language services manual that they have, since they have their own language service contract, they don't really fall into this purview. However, these resources are available countywide, so anything that they do need, they can still access these contracts for, if there's a need that comes up.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Would that also include the DA's office?
Absolutely, yeah. Any part of the county, absolutely. And the DA's office, I believe, also uses their own separate contractor because court legal interpretation is also a very unique skill set. And so it makes a lot of sense for them to have their separate contract for that as well. And then this, I believe, this is my last slide, yes. Perfect. Okay, so these are just a long list of upcoming projects, upcoming work. This is stuff I already went over with you, but I just wanted to lay it out so you can kind of see it as well on one slide. But I want to end the presentation by sharing that this is incredibly important work that's happening at the county. Because it's a new program, there are a lot of urgent needs that are being addressed now, simply because they haven't been addressed until now. And so those are things that I'm trying to address first and prioritize. That being said, there's a lot more to look forward to within the EDI program at the county. A lot of this work has already been stood up by staff that came way before me, staff that have been here for years, who've been doing this work on their own, in their own departments and teams. And for this work to continue and to continue being effective, it really requires the collaboration between me, leadership, other staff and teams at the county. And it requires leadership support as well. Anytime I've been part of this work in the past, I think there's always a period of uncomfortability, I would say, when folks are not used to something, when there's something that, even I don't have a knowledge about, there's an anxiety that comes with that. I do think that's just part of our growing pains. That's just part of the process. And that's also, these are really important learning opportunities. When someone is uncomfortable or anxious or doesn't understand something, that is my time to shine and talk to them and talk about the importance and establish why we're doing this at the county. And I really appreciate everyone's support in the room for listening to the presentation today, asking your questions. I'm happy to answer any more if you have any.
Well, earlier you were talking about working with the county website, and this seems timely because our website desperately needed updating. I think sometime around the first of the year, it will be rolled out, and so having your contribution just seems timely and needed.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And of course, and thank you for saying that last little bit that you said about feeling uncomfortable. And I think that's a perfect way to describe it. And I've definitely been there. I'm there every time still. So
Yeah. Of course, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I have to say, I feel that way in this role every day. So it's a common and it's a normal feeling to have. And then to your point as well about the website, that's a piece that's going to be ongoing for as long as I'm in the role, because with this work, it's never done. It's always something that's evolving. And so I love to offer my support to everyone at the county in terms of, utilize me, call me, send me an email so I can support everyone in learning how do we even apply an equity lens for a website. It's all a learning process, and no one's going to be perfect at it from the start. Thank you.
another little question, but
I guess I just wanted to make a quick comment. First, thanking Sarah for her work and the conversations that you and I have had over the last month. And, one thing that we've talked a lot about, and she mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation, is the distinguishing equity versus equality. And I think a lot of the equity work, it starts with a lot of training and a lot of understanding and a lot of intentional and sometimes challenging and difficult discussions. And so as I look at a lot of the different things that Sarah has, I think are all really good, but one thing I guess I would just really emphasize that from a county standpoint is where will our effort be around intentional training and really pushing just from an overall cultural standpoint and understanding, because to her point, there isn't always that understanding. That picture that she put up there is probably one of the best pictures that I've ever seen that really gives you an understanding what equality versus equity is. And, we're all on our own different various journeys, but I think just being much more intentional around our training and our efforts. I know that's not all on Sarah, but there's a lot of good training that we could bring to the county to help us progress in our own learning and our own journeys. So just wanted to put that out there for you, and I just appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you.
I would like to jump off from what Rick just said. I have been to a lot of different trainings. The Courageous Conversations training is one of the best I've been to. It was by far one of the most productive in terms of helping to readjust your lens. And but the biggest thing that I have found missing here at the county since I've been here is that we've made trainings accessible to staff. But it's usually only a self-selected subgroup that attends them, and it's usually the same subgroup that attends them. And there's never any follow-up for practice skills learned. And we've done that even just in the last year with a couple of the trainings we've done for our leadership team. They've been fantastic trainings, but then we don't use the tools. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges for any organization is actually using the new tools.
Absolutely. And thank you for that feedback. Thank you both for that feedback. That's a really important piece. And I do agree. I think that sometimes that's where things get a little stuck is we have this information, but where's the process for what do we do with this information? And that's going to be a really key aspect of the training. And then also, how do we make this impact last? It's great that it's meaningful. It's great that some of us get to do the training, but how do I share this with my team members? How do we apply this to our jobs? How do we apply this to even just our workplace culture in meaningful, long, not long, but in meaningful big picture ways? Yeah.
So my other question is, do we have, or will it be part of some upcoming documentation stuff that you're working on, like an equity, diversity, and inclusion, like mission statement?
That's absolutely something, that's something I've worked on for specific teams, for specific purposes, I would say, but it has not been something that's been a countywide initiative
I
yet.
would love for the county to have one and just bam, have it right on our website, you know?
I think that's a really wonderful idea, and I think that sends, I think having mission statements like that is important. And I think that the county is at the right place for something like that because of all the work we're already doing. And I think having that message, especially in a timely way with our new website rollout, will be a really great opportunity for us to implement something like that. Yet another way for not just our workforce, but our community members to feel included.
I have another question related to that.
Yes.
I think I may have asked you this before, but in our budget, we have budget for a plan. And so that's another place that this fits is thinking about how equity, diversity, and inclusion fits into that overall strategic plan. That seems like a real opportune time. For some of that.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I'm turning to Rachel because she's the one that's gonna drive that.
That's right.
I think this would be a really good opportunity for that. Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciated your equality and equity slide. I've had the notion for a long time. I called it and treating people the same versus equality, where you gauge what the need is and then do the action. So it took me a while to remember the two words that that I've had, but I really appreciate the update. I know you've been working hard, but I didn't have a real sense of a lot of the specifics. So this is a great update and look forward to having these on a regular basis.
I'm looking forward to that as well. Thank you all for your leadership and your support with the work that's been conducted so far and everything to come. So thank you.
And you didn't need to be nervous. Your presentation.
I have stopped sweating, so that's a good sign. So well, let's just start it again. So there we go. And Miss Meeman, I'm done.
And it's scary, but we're right on time.
Perfect.
So I think we'll take a 10-minute break and then start back up with the coordinated homeless response.
Thank you.
This 10-minute break will last 10 minutes.
All right, see you at 10:41.
Ready? Okay, I think we're ready. Welcome back to our October 10th goal setting meeting. Next up is coordinated homeless response, strategic plan, adoption and update. April Holland and Rebecca Taylor. I heard something about singing or,
We're gonna save that for the end,
okay,
only if we go over an hour though.
okay.
So, Commissioners Rachel, Vance, Rick, others, welcome to this discussion. Sarah, in her presentation, she talked about, being in a sort of embracing discomfort and being vulnerable. It's important to sort of be in that space as we talk about navigating complex topics, including our homeless response system. Today, we'd like your input and direction to help us bring some clarity, which will bring benefits both internally and externally with our community to some elements of the homeless response system. So Rebecca provided created and provided some incredible supporting documents to go along with our discussion here. But it's important to understand that, the MOUs with the city, county, and community services consortium are community action agencies were just signed last September. So this is new work. There's a history of several years of effort in our community along this topic. There's a lot of work to be aligned as we move forward. There's also a lot of new and quickly changing elements at play, which has kept the team on their toes and constantly learning. So it's really their growth mindset that is much of what brings us here today as we move forward. So I'm gonna just turn it to Rebecca to get to the meat of it.
Yeah, one of the intentions today is to really give space for a discussion. We've come a lot over the last year and a half with really just kind of a report out. And given a lot of the other high-level projects that the county's been working on, we really wanted to make sure that we allotted some space to update our commissioners, but also to get some feedback on the next steps. So as April alluded to, there has been a lot of learning opportunities throughout this process. So for example, just to kind of get us back in, let's see, was it 2022 or 2021? We had this great structure of our HOPE Advisory Board and a really good governing document through the bylaws that really contemplated what a effective coordinated homeless response system would look like in our community. And at that time that those HOPE bylaws were developed, the resources we currently have in the county were not here, nor were they fully able to be contemplated during the drafting of the HOPE bylaws. And so after the HOPE Advisory Board developed the HOPE policy recommendations, and that really gave a sense of what the quantity of work that is necessary in our community to convene all the partners to move us forward in an effective response to our homelessness issues in Benton County, that's when staff, both from the city and county, were really looking at what types of resources do we need in our community. And at that time, that was when it was contemplated that, we need definitely funding resources beyond the local level to support these efforts, both internally at the county and externally with our partners. And then similarly, just the ability to move these very complex projects forward in our community and make sure that the timelines were aligned with funding resources and other things that come through, like policy changes. And so there was a project management element that was identified as well by staff as necessary resources and capacity that we would need in our community to be able to move the HOPE policy recommendations forward. So fast forward a little bit upon my hiring as a project manager, and then also our grant writer and researcher contract employee. That's really when we started to understand, now we actually have something, physical that we can look at and work towards and move some of these topics forward with our partners and explore, really kind of shine a flashlight into what we didn't fully understand. And then at that same time, Commissioner Oger, in partnership with Julia Arena, our program coordinator, pursued House Bill 4123, which would provide additional resources and a framework that would really operationalize our community's response to homelessness. And so that came with its own requirements and also opportunities. And really, throughout that process, it continued to give us solidify our understanding of what the role the county and the city could play in our response to homelessness. Simultaneously, the HOPE Advisory Board bylaws contemplated these very similar activities and responsibilities, but did not contemplate this new infrastructure that was allotted by the new staff hiring and House Bill 4123. And so given the tight timelines we had, we were doing a lot of research, really trying to bring our community with us in this conversation about what House Bill 4123 is, how does the strategic plan that's required by House Bill 4123 fit into the previous efforts of our community, for example, the 10-year plan, and then the update to the 10-year plan, and then the HOPE policy recommendations that all were building off of each other. How does this 5-year strategic plan play in that? And at the same time, how does a strategic plan that is essentially implemented and promoted by the county capture the work that really is needed in this space that may not entirely be the responsibility of the county, but what role can we play to move this work forward, and how do we understand this role of this document? So there's a lot of things. What is the role of the county just primarily in this space? What is the role of the strategic plan in informing our community efforts? And just moving forward, what do we both have in line with our community to move that forward? And so just to quickly kind of get off on a side, which I don't want to say as a side because it's all wrapped into this, House Bill 5019 that came forward that allotted funds to our community also gave a framework as far as a planning template about exactly how we can coordinate efforts, both from an investment standpoint, but also very specifically goal objectives, very, focused on metrics of making successes happen in our community around homelessness, which that further gave us a even clearer understanding of the role that the county can potentially serve in assisting with these large-scale community-wide program development and planning efforts to make sure that we are aligning the different parallel resources and investments to make sure that we're leveraging those in an effective way. So in that, through the exploration and development of the 5-year strategic plan and partnership with going out to our service providers, ones that are serving our homelessness population, some that are in our medical and health services, our community action agencies, and just, our community organizations, we understood that this was a portfolio of work that would require a review process that had the expertise of the work identified in the 5-year strategic plan. But at the same time, we needed to address the House Bill 4123 requirements about the various components, which, as stated in the staff report sent to you, this included an advisory board that would be responsible potentially for the adoption of the strategic plan. Now, there is an option in House Bill 4123 that every member government that has signed on to the MOU, as April talked about, that we adopted, could adopt a strategic plan in each of those communities. It is assumed that it would be the strategic plan, but as the legislation reads, it's a strategic plan that addresses all these requirements. That certainly is not a lift for all our communities that they are in a position to be able to do. So whether it would be through an advisory board, the adoption of the strategic plan, or through the member governments, it is assumed that we'd be working with one singular document of a strategic plan. So again, as we were looking at this and exploring from a city perspective and a county perspective with the different structures around advisory boards in both of those agencies, at a point we understood there needed to be some separation from the level of operational guidance that staff, both at the city and county, would need to be able to move this work forward, and that our community still had a public engagement component along with a policy oversight and policy guidance. And understanding those two things, there is an effectiveness that comes with separating those two components. And so in that process, staff were exploring what exactly would the advisory board be in the context of House Bill 4123, noting that we already had an advisory board being the HOPE board for policy recommendations. So in that process, the Intergovernmental Council was recommended as the body that would go forward with the adoption of the strategic plan, and then also help align the operations of the different jurisdictions in Benton County, those who chose to come on to the MOU. Then fast forward to here, where we have a very large body of work that both engages our partners who operate on a regional level and also in services that are beyond the scope of Benton County's government. We realized we wanted to have, one, transparency with our community, especially the individuals and the partners that have really played a key role in getting us to where we are today. But also that have the expertise to give us feedback on that strategic plan, that did we hear you correctly? Is this what we need in our community? And so in that process, we revisited the HOPE Advisory Board bylaws, especially with inquiries we were receiving from members of the HOPE Board to really understand what their role is moving forward, and really wanting to give space for a discussion about those roles and responsibilities and opportunities for clarification with these new components we have. And in that, in discussion with staff here, it was then recommended that we merge the responsibilities and the representation and components of the executive committee as described in the HOPE Advisory Board or bylaws, along with the Intergovernmental Council, and to effectively meet the needs of both our city partners and the county partners, and make the necessary recommendations to our board about amendments to the HOPE bylaws for the purpose of adopting the strategic plan and guiding this work moving forward.
Thank you.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Frankly, that's how I see it in the first place. So because the model that we adopted initially for the HOPE Advisory Board had an executive council, and the Intergovernmental Council had more authority. It was based on both the Lane County and the Multnomah County models. So we didn't have any further authorities to grant the executive board of HOPE initially, because we had no money, we had no, we didn't have the agreements with the other cities that come around us. So now that we do have more municipalities involved, more partners in general, and there are funds coming from different sources, I think it makes sense to acknowledge the HOPE executive board as having that intergovernmental council role.
So, thank you, Commissioner. In terms of the adjustment adjustments needed to incorporate the HB 4123 requirements reflected into the membership of that executive committee. I'd love to hear or explore, what that could look like. And maybe before we dive into that, Rick, you and I have discussed over time that at some point and for some things, something akin to an intergovernmental council, some convening of county and city leadership for specific policy solutions is something that could be very valuable here. I think for where we are now with our strategic plan and getting to that place, we can start to think about, as we make these changes, what that governmental policy body looks like, whether it's something that utilizes some existing framework, whether it's some kind of subset, sub-work group committee, something within whatever we choose. But I don't want to discount the potential value of that as we move forward.
And if I just might add on that, and we've all had lots of conversations about this, and sometimes I have to back down to we're dealing with House Bill 4123, and I support all the things that Rebecca and April are working on. But to April's point, I mean, if we really are serious about making true difference in relation to trying to mitigate the problem of homelessness, trying to be able to end homelessness, it starts oftentimes in government policy. We hold the purse strings, and so if certainly government can come together and come up with mutually agreed strategies and policies and consistencies and removing the barriers from our service providers, that is going to go a long way. So I truly believe that is one of the keys to that. Again, understanding where we're at with the House Bill 4123, but I think long-term, I think there's huge value to that if you can get all of the jurisdictions together on the same page.
So I'm trying to tease this out. You're seeing an intergovernmental council as having more decision authority, or just more policy recommendation authority, because no intergovernmental council is going to be able to make decisions for the municipalities.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Thanks. What I'm saying is I don't want to discount that bringing governmental leaders together to work through solutions that may be on the table, or ways to find local regional solutions are going to, as we grow this infrastructure, I think there's value to being able to bring people together, whether that's the city and county managers, convening in the board meeting, whether it's something else. I just I want you to ensure that we're not saying that there's not a place for these policymakers to be at the table. Right now, however, our strategic plan, if we had our city managers and board members adopting this, I think it does a disservice to our community members who are doing this work, because they are the subject matter experts who can speak to this work. So that my aside was merely to say that there's a place for that, and there's value in it. And I think we should re-center our Hope Executive Committee in this HB 4123 adoption.
If I may.
Please, please.
And one of the things we found as even we're working through the legislative report that we need to turn in here shortly is about lessons learned through this process. And one of them, the questions they asked us is, your regional coordination. And in this case for Benton County, that regional coordination under House Bill 4123 is within Benton County scope. There are a few other House Bill 4123 communities that have multiple counties. We, in our attempt to form the intergovernmental council along with scheduling the meetings, we did see that some of our communities had concerns about partnering in that format with Benton County, not fully understanding what the scope and responsibilities were. We still had intended to continue to invite them and keep them updated about these things because we felt there were certain specific discrete projects we could be coordinating with our smaller communities, but a step to completely partner under what is not fully understood, it can be concerning. I would be concerned about it too, especially with if, you know, my constituents have other priorities or my computer is working on this particular thing. And so with the idea, as April and Rick talk about, is that there may be other forums in which we already have engagement from our smaller communities and find alignment on a very specific project, then that's where that coordination might be more effectively done, because there is already a sense of belonging to those structures instead of this new one that is not fully understood. That if we were to be, if the IGC under House Bill 4123 and its connection to HOPE were to be the spokesperson for some of those projects, that might limit the ability for us to be able to engage our smaller communities in an effective way. So at the same time, there still would be, as required by House Bill 4123, the representation to have that level of government coordination with an elected official from each member government being part of the advisory board that would adopt. And then so that, and when we talk about the merging of those two things within the HOPE bylaws, it's really to understand what exactly we want to accomplish with the executive committee, and not simply say we're appointing the executive committee as it's talked about or currently written about in the HOPE bylaws, but to really open that up and say, okay, what pieces can we move around to be effective for what we understand today?
Thank you. So I have a question, and this might be a silly question, and you can feel free to tell me if it is. So it's a 5-year plan, strategic plan. I guess my question is there another option to do instead of changing and updating all the MOUs and IGAs and all that stuff, is there an option to just make some ones on the side that then designate the HOPE Executive Committee as that the Intergovernmental Council? The reason I ask that is if there's ever a time that we want to untangle the two, it would be easier to just go away with a different IGA than redoing our IGAs and MOUs all over again a third time. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's lots of other reasons why we do want to together.
I have an initial response, but I want to give space. Okay, so currently the HOPE bylaws, as Commissioner Ogier was speaking to, has a lot of roles and responsibilities that are called out being part of the HOPE Advisory Board's roles. And those roles are now being accomplished by staff. So I think at the very least, I agree that there very likely could be some not having all embedded into one document. Also, making sure that we leave room and space for changes. I don't know what the lift would be of any difference between amending the original documents versus creating supplemental documents to inform that. But I do think at this time, it's important that we look at the HOPE bylaws and really make sure that it is acknowledging the operational infrastructure that we have, and the idea that the executive committee is kind of set to do this purpose. I just think that that's be helpful with our partners, especially the members of the HOPE Advisory Board, who are going to rely on that, artifact of the HOPE bylaws to really inform who they are in this space, because those are the questions. So yes, I think it could be a mixture of those things to be effective. We certainly want to try to figure out what will reduce the amount of, bureaucracy around this, but at the same time, what is going to be the most transparent for our operations and our community engagement.
Okay, thank you. And then have you had these conversations with the city of Corvallis and or CSC?
So we have, we've alerted them. First of all, we just started the question, right? We come to them with, this is the development that we have with the strategic plan. This is what we're understanding. These are some of the questions we're getting from our partners about their role in the development of the strategic plan. And we got some feedback from the city specifically about the structure of their advisory boards. So they have a pretty robust policy and code around the different types of advisory boards. And that really helped us understand, given, and the guidance was, that this really, it will be up to the county to take that first step to initiate amending these. And so then we came back with and advised them that this is our recommendation to the Board of Commissioners that then will inform our next steps. So then we've alerted Peggy as well with the staff report here. We got that out to her today. I apologize if that's the first time. But
I did it last week too.
okay, excellent, thank you. And we have the executive committee meeting tomorrow that we hope to discuss this as well with the executive committee of the Hope Advisory Board.
Okay, just hypothetically, if we were to, if the city says, no, we don't want to make any amendments, then not that I think that would happen. I mean, what would we do? We'd be back to the drawing board.
I think that's really, we are at a state where each of these steps is going to tell us whether we go right or left.
And then you haven't heard any concern or anything from them?
Not from staff.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that my sense is that there's buy-in to having a coordinated office, and that we just need to figure out how to arrange the furniture and get the floor plans right in order to keep doing the work. That's my main goal. I don't want to have us spend so much time on all the IGAs and the structures and not move towards outcomes. But that said, we need to have the right structure so that there is true potential for collaboration and participation for all of our partners, including the smaller cities. So, yeah. I guess when you were talking about the need for the gathering of policymakers from time to time, I can see, for instance, the coordinated regional office hosting some sort of a policy summit that would include council members from the various small cities and Corvallis and county commissioners to really delve into some of these issues. Or we could have an every other year summit or a little mini conference or something to get up to date. I mean, there are lots of things we could do that could play some of that role and set the stage for then policy decisions to be made by the individual jurisdictions.
We have a lot of things moving that I think are going to, so for example, the conversations around the continuum care even are going to bring people to the table across a large policymaking geographical boundary. So, and I really appreciate you talking about getting the structure right. One of the things that we've been contemplating, what is our role as a coordinated office? And in some cases, we're passionate about, the staff in this team are passionate about really getting out there and getting change happening in our community. And sometimes these things might be looked at as like, why are we wasting our time on this? But when we have conversations with our partners and there's ambiguity, like you said, is when it comes down to really moving things quickly, when we have these things clarified in the beginning, it is amazing how effective we are working together. Even with House Bill 5019, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I've observed something come forward about an effective method in which the county can partner in this space. And so I think that this is actually, for me, a very exciting opportunity to be able to clarify for our community, and, staff can speak with integrity about their roles too, when we have this clarified.
Speaking of clarifying, I'm not exactly clear what the current status or difference is between the HOPE Executive Committee and the Intergovernmental Council.
So that's what we want to have happen, is you don't know the difference because there will not be one, but the executive committee was really in practice informing the agenda development of the Hope Advisory Board and picking out and focusing the scope of the Hope Advisory Board. the advisory board as recommended or required by House Bill 4123 was really to guide what the coordinated office, homeless response office would be working on and various ways to align the operations of each member government. So because of the operational potential influence of the Intergovernmental Council or the advisory board as described by House Bill 4123, staff originally wanted to make sure that there was very clear dichotomy between the executive committee and the Intergovernmental Council. However, in reflecting on the body of work as developed, we realized there is a level of engagement we need from the Hope Advisory Board because of the expertise and the commitments of membership through the structure that was already created for Hope Advisory Board. But that if potential small changes to the Hope bylaws could make it so the executive committee could fulfill that operational guidance component without creating another advisory board that may not have the expertise and the experience to be able to give us feedback on the strategic plan and other things with our partners in our community. So the difference was specifically policy versus operations, and membership was different too. Merging those together, we're hoping that we can effectively accomplish those two different things within the scope of the Hope Advisory Board, with the executive committee having a very specific role.
Thank
Makes sense.
And I appreciate that. I remember when Julia Arena started and one-man band kind of operation, identifying all kinds of needs without commensurate access to resources. I think in a relatively short amount of time, we've come a long ways, and the state has figured out that local governments on their own can't come close to solving the problem. So I think that's a large change that's happened since we stood up the Hope effort. That's encouraging. And also shows the getting organized and defining problems. Shovel ready is tossed around a lot, and county was more shovel ready than a lot of communities, and that's a good thing.
And because it's a lot of work of our hard staff, a lot of hard work from our staff.
We're hardened.
Hardcore.
Well, if I may clarify that we have received guidance from the Board of Commissioners to return with recommendations of amendments to the Hope bylaws to address the items that we've included here today.
Yes. I saw there was a motion in the packet, but I don't know if you actually need the motion. That's
It's not a motion, it's a recommendation.
a recommendation, you're right.
Page 45.
Yep.
So I think we'll be back on the 24th then with those changes. So do a quick turnaround.
Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. And if I may just really quickly touch on something Commissioner Malone, you mentioned about the state understanding about local communities. Can't do this alone. It is amazing how much that they are listening to what we need at the local level and realizing that this partnership is reciprocal. Even through House Bill 5019, we're getting movement through and really understanding to give feedback. And in a way, they've given us a strong template to start asking questions and help them answer them too. So I am hopeful.
Yes, oh yeah, oh no, we kept it under an hour, so we're singing. I don't know.
Would you refresh my memory, House Bill 5019?
is the one that awarded money, specifically around the executive order, the declaration of emergency that the governor declared on homelessness that didn't originally include the rural continuum care. Those communities that were not included in the emergency declaration still are not part of the emergency declaration, but the budget implementation of that executive order through House Bill 5019 allocated money to those communities. So Benton County received a award for our shelter activities, along with a rapid rehousing award that we are working with our community right now on a plan to be able to roll that money out in a way that we'll be able to rehouse 31 individuals by June 2025.
It was like $1.2 million to rehouse 31 individuals.
Mhm.
And then money from the Ben's Cold Weather Shelter.
Yep. And we are in, just so you know, that at the same time that we are working on making the deadlines to the state for all that, we are also going to be amending bylaws and attempting to complete a 5-year strategic plan. So just, I mean, yeah, it's a lot, but in a way, having these things all here at the same time on the table has actually been helpful to inform them. It's just a lot as we, Commissioner Archer, I'm going to quote you after we were done presenting. You said, it is a lot. It is, but not with beyond our ability to organize. I think we've got a good structure here and a lot of really dedicated staff and support from other departments. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Vance. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you can get this all done.
We know you will. Just try not to put yourself to pressure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, county administrators, or should that be plural or singular update?
Oops, Commissioner Moore, is it 3.4?
Oh, I'm sorry. Board meeting, public participation, and comment procedures. This has come up occasionally, public comment at the beginning of our board meetings, and generally the person makes a presentation and gets it into the record. And sometimes commissioners want to comment, and sometimes we don't. And I'm not sure if we need a policy, but I think it's worth a discussion. Just what is that? Just the individual making a presentation and then moving on, or are we engaging in debate or dialogue? And it's a question, but we've it's not clear what the expectations of board is when we have public comment. So I thought I'd put that on the agenda to see if we can come up with a little clarity.
When I first started with the board, we didn't have as much public engagement because we were not in this hybrid environment. And so we rarely had people come speak, but we often engaged with whoever came to speak with us, because we wanted additional clarification on the points that they were making, and to understand where they were coming from. And we didn't, when I first began with the board, limit people's time. We didn't need to. We didn't. So we would ask people to keep it succinct, but 5 minutes, they went 5 minutes. It's changed quite a bit. I like the ability, I like to reserve the right to ask questions, because I want to be able to clarify what someone's really trying to say. And often the agenda item that they're speaking to is later in meeting and I want to be able to ask them because they don't have a role later in the meeting to provide their input. Secondarily, sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with the agenda whatsoever. It's just a public comment. And likewise, I want to understand, you know, where they're coming from and what the true issue is so that we can address it. And so I feel that it's important to have the ability to ask questions of folks that come to make public comment. And, you know, in the past, it's really been the chair's prerogative to decide, you know, how things run. It also makes sense to have these conversations so that we're all on the same page and understand what the chair is thinking about how things run, or to have something that lasts beyond a year in terms of procedure. Yeah.
So my 2 cents is, I'm okay having it with it. Okay, so first of all, I would too like to reserve the right to ask a follow-up question or respond to a person's comment if I feel like it's necessary. Although I would like, I'm a fan of the timer. I'm okay having it be like the chair's prerogative though. You know, maybe if the new chair takes over at the first meeting, saying, you know, hey, I want to give people 5 minutes, you know, and just letting it know that that's how it's going to go. And when I'm chair, I'll say, okay, I'm going to give people 3 minutes, and that's just how it's going to go. So I don't think we need to be as stern as no follow-up, no questions. Because I think there's sometimes that it is appropriate for us to ask follow-up questions. But I also don't want people who provide public comment to think that they can just have an unlimited amount of time. And I think we should maybe think about clarifying that it's a time for them to comment to us and us receive their comments, and they're not necessarily guaranteed any conversation back and forth. And I think we're usually pretty good about someone offering to follow up with them afterward, or staff, the appropriate staff member following up.
Do you have any?
I would just echo what Zan said, that pre-pandemic, we didn't worry about time limit. I will say though, that whether you're very stringent on the time requirement or not, just letting folks know they have a time limit creates a self-regulating presentation, which is not a bad thing. The other thing, I would just throw the, however you guys decide you wish to go, the only caution I would put out there is to remember that a lot of the specific questions you get are very subject matter specific. So if somebody asks, why isn't my property exempt from taxes? Well, that's really for Tammy Trace. No problem asking questions, but just remember that perhaps the answer lies somewhere else.
Yeah.
As usual.
We have a lot of people who know a lot of things in this organization, and we do a good job of drawing on their expertise. We should direct the public there as well.
Agreed.
Rachel.
I think, once again, I do think a public comment of about 5 minutes will help people think about what they would like to comment to us. But I do also agree with Mr. Wise that it would be nice to be able to comment back, especially if they need some clarification. So we understand their comment, if they, and what their issue there is, so we can, of course, help them get the resources they need and possibly the answers that they want to hear. Or don't want to hear, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the time limit. Sometimes we have a lengthy agenda. If we get behind at the start, it doesn't get any better. I think 3 minutes is reasonable if you can't. I don't even know if he was famous British author apologizing for writing a 4-page letter because he didn't have time to write a 1 page. All the lawyers laugh.
Like that.
Because it does take work to, well, that's extraneous, and I've already said that. And I think that's is fine. I appreciate your comment, Vance. Us not, board of commissioners not being too definitive about things that maybe we don't have all the information. So,
People can always call us, they can email us.
yeah,
If they have a message that takes more than 3 minutes, they can bring a friend and they can talk for 3 and their friend can pick up and talk for the next 3. So I think there's ways that will communicate with us. But in my experience, there are many people that if you give them 5 minutes, they will just fill up the whole 5 minutes with the same message. If we have, 10 of those people come in, that adds up.
well, and doesn't advance our education.
Sure.
So we need to purchase a time clock.
I always forget to let the first, does it say on the sign up? I think it does say on the sign up sheet.
I think it is helpful though to have one of those ones that sits on the counter and it
Sure.
like
Oh,
is green and then it might turn yellow when you have like so much time left and that way they know to come
and then a
back.
siren goes on.
And then you don't have to be like, then you don't have to be awkward and interrupt them as
Yeah.
much,
Yeah, no, that would be helpful because I routinely forget if there's more than one to tell the first person there is a time limit. And so that's a more efficient, more fair way of letting people know.
It's easier than having your cell phone timer on, having to monitor that and listen at the same time.
Well, that's what we've been doing.
Yes, right.
Good, that was, I knew we didn't need 20 minutes on that. 3.5 county administrator update.
So I don't have a lot of updates, so I'm going to be able to give back some of your 15 minutes today of your valuable time. But in general, as many of you know, I started last week. I had 2 really nice receptions and I got to meet some of the most amazing staff who are thoughtful. They're very frank and direct, and I appreciate that. And they're very mission-based. They love their organization. They love the people they work with. I pretty much have an aggressive schedule for the rest of the month to meet all the directors that report up to me, as well as what their needs are. To just kind of learn the organization, learn what they're doing, what functions they have, great big projects that they may be in charge of, and how we can support them. I'm also spending a lot of time with our 3 commissioners that are here today and learning a lot about priorities and also their background and what they bring to order. So I thank them for their patience, for my learning curve, and I want to give a special shout out to Rick, who's been holding the fort down, as well as Tracy, who have been very helpful muddling through and learning folks as well. I feel very supported here, and I'm really looking forward to learning the organization. And now I'll give you back, I think, 12 minutes on my 15 minutes, so.
Well, speaking of Rick, thank you for filling in as interim or acting county administrator for all of September and a little bit of October here. And I was just thinking about that, and it's good practice for you, right?
Builds character.
That plus Rachel may take a vacation sometime or other reasons for not being here. And it's nice to have, I know Joe had a rotating group of people that would fill in for him when he was gone. And so not only did you get us through September in good shape, but I think there may be a week or 2 in your future where you may be filling in again. It might be easier having some experience, but we are thrilled to have you here, Rachel, and it seems like you're jumping right in. And, second week already. Look
I know.
at this.
Keep changing my parking spot. I haven't decided.
There is that.
Variety is the spice of life.
There you go.
So, any questions for Rachel at this point? I will move on to commissioner updates. Who wants to lead us off?
I don't really have any updates. I just mentioned, or I saw, so we got a phone call on Friday from a woman named Betty, and I had responded and said, I'll get back to her. And then I realized I didn't copy all of you. And you did email me, Zan, to see if I was taking care of it.
I can talk to you.
You did talk to me, yes. My phone, I tried to send you a response on my work phone and it didn't go through.
Yeah.
So apologies. But yes, I have followed up with her and forwarded just the concerns to community development, and I'm waiting to hear back. So she didn't really want to give too much personal information and just kind of just wanted to share concerns, I guess. So.
As an event or a team.
Yeah, well, maybe. So she was just concerned that she's had to submit a floodplain permit so many times. And it just seems like, so can't you guys just keep that on file? You know, versus like, we did the electrical, submit a floodplain. We did, you know, this, submit a flood. So it just, it's her account. I don't.
No, I understand.
Yeah, so I'm just looking for clarification or explanation or whatever. And she didn't really want to make a formal complaint. She just kind of wanted to ask and start a conversation about it.
Process issue.
Yeah.
Had a concern.
And Commissioner, have you gotten a response from the community development director yet?
Yes, so he just forwarded me straight to Toby Lewis. Great. So I just sent that to her and we'll see if, I know she's busy and I just sent that this morning, so whenever she has time.
All right, well, is that it?
Yeah. Yes.
A couple weeks ago already, I had a meeting with Albany Mayor Alex Johnson. Speaking of Albany, I warming up for you, and she's from Albany, New York.
We have a HR portal, and Albany, Oregon and Albany, New York are constantly getting cross job applications. So it does happen, so.
It worked out for you.
It did. I got some great, yeah, exactly. That's how I found out about this job, so I didn't want to tell you guys.
He's a busy person and it was an often postponed meeting, but with us having North Albany and they're not very far away, it's, I think that's a good relationship to encourage, and I really appreciate his enthusiasm and he puts a lot into whatever he's doing.
That's great.
So, and some of that may go with me being chair, but I encourage those kind of relationships, whether it's Philomath or Albany or North Albany is our second largest city. Where is it? It's just a interesting piece of geography. Week and a half ago, all three of us went on the they're calling the timber tour. Star Cruise supplies the bus. And, I really appreciated getting, seeing Larry Vanel and the hazelnut processing. I mean, in the last decade, hazelnut filberts were a traditional crop in 100 years. Sometime in the last couple decades, filberts became hazelnuts. But what did you say? 2006 price was $2 a pound, which was just off the chart. That kind of got people's attention. I haven't seen acreage figures, but triple the traditional acreage or more. And so there's Oregon produces the majority of the nuts in the US, but we're less than 10% of the world market because of turkey. So that's interesting. My understanding is our nuts are bigger, so if the baker wants something to show up versus ground up, ours, I think, chosen, but it, because of and it takes about 5 years for a new planting to start producing, and so the new production is just getting going, and maybe not into a very good market. And, so the story from growers that I know is, well, if Mars candied bars or Kellogg's cereal, or name a large food producer wanted our product, they could take everything we could produce. Theoretically true. I keep asking, well, if any of those outfits signed anything about buying, and no. So I think there'll be, and Larry kind of indicated there'll maybe some shakeout as the new production comes on and the new markets aren't built up yet. But OSU has been involved in producing or developing new cultivars of hazelnuts. So, but just to see a production facility, because that's will be a decent sized crop in Benton County and in Willamette Valley. Traditionally, it was around Newburgh and that area. I think there's a bunch of trees that are planted on not suitable ground, and they won't produce very much. Anyway.
What time is harvesting? What time of year?
Now.
Yeah.
As soon as it dries out, they sweep them up, and so if it's wet, it doesn't work very well, or it's real slow. So they'll be. You say they were half done, or when we were there on September 29th, and we had some rain in there, and so they were waiting till it. Yeah, he was looking forward to the 80-degree days that were forecasted correctly.
They have different, like subspecies or variants of hazelnut.
Varieties.
Some of them, yeah, varieties. Some of them are ready for harvesting before others.
One of them starts early and ends late. So they call it a timber tour, but we got some ag in there. That's an annual kind of this time of year. Commissioners and there was a warehouser person on the bus. I think Eric Thompson and Thompson Timber kind sets the agenda, organizes it. It's fun and I think worthwhile. Got to see Hull Oaks lumber again. Till about a decade ago, it was the only steam-powered lumber mill in the country. Produce sawdust, burn it, produce steam, run the mill, but they're 100-year-old steam boiler. If something broke somewhere in Pennsylvania, they could have a part made and take 2 months. They couldn't afford to be down, so they are now electric.
Yeah.
But we had the kind of rare opportunity to see a large log carved up. I can't remember the diameter, but it was, I couldn't. So put the log in and start trimming it up and flipping it. Wanted some bridge timbers for somebody in Pennsylvania or
Vermont.
yeah, it was.
Special order.
Everything they do is, in theory, and it's probably the big stuff, is pre-ordered. I mean, because real slow and large is why they're still in business, but they can't afford to try to compete with Weyerhaeuser's 2x4, 6s. Although they produce 2x6s, 2x8s that go into blue lamb timbers because their boards have all their edges. They need square edges for composite. So that on purpose, that's the smallest, probably 2x6 is the smallest. It's 2x8, smallest they make. They end up with 2x4s or other stuff just as they're slicing. That's what you get. And our guide pointed out that the person doing the slicing and deciding it's not a computer, it's a person. Quite valuable to the firm. And had a nice visit with Senator Sarah Kilser-Bluen yesterday. Tried to do this a couple months ago, and she sick and had some challenges. She's finally getting back in gear, and with potential of Representative Rayfield running for a different job, her position becomes even more important to us. That's what I have.
Okay. Yesterday, I think I'll start with the stuff that's already happened. Longer ago, I've been to several different nonprofit events in the community. Celebration Greenbelt Land Trust had for their big fundraising campaign. This is the biggest local land trust they operate. They started here in Benton County, Corvallis, with county assistance, in fact, and then expanded out to about 5 counties. So they work in Benton, Polk, Marion, Lane at this point. But they have made some wonderful land acquisitions to protect habitat and to protect working ag and forest lands as well. But they had a very ambitious fundraising goal and they met it. So it was a lovely celebration. I also went to the Arts Center fundraiser this last weekend, which I've never been to before. It was different community, different cross section of folks. This is interesting. and to kick off for creation of a new foundation for the ABC House, which is our child abuse nonprofit provider. They're based in Lynn County, in Albany, but they serve both Lynn and Benton counties and are a vital partner. Unfortunately, too much work. I also went to something that was not as enjoyable. As a commissioner, I'm considered a lobbyist, as the county administrator, and had to do my legislative equity office mandatory training. And I think that the mandate now says you have to do it every other year in person. I'm not quite sure. But that's in statute. And so I went up and did that Leo training last week. It was 2 hours. It was a huge room full of people. Everyone from folks that work at nonprofits to Rep. Gomberg to our former PIO for the county, Rick Olson, to, you know, you name it, that anyone and everyone that lobbies in any way.
And that's due before the end of the year.
And there are only like 2 or 3 sessions, so
We should go. They probably have to go,
Yeah.
right? We have to go.
Is everybody on the same schedule as far as in person?
I didn't fully understand that, but judging by the size of the room, people were confused about why they had to be there. Yeah, it's in statute, and the legislature, after experiencing a couple of sexual harassment incidents and things going sideways, decided they needed to have everyone trained. Upcoming, one more thing that happened already. AOC day yesterday. Legislative committee is getting ready for the upcoming legislative session. So the way things work there is that each of the steering committees that have a different focal area meet to talk about legislation and make recommendations for priorities and for principles for the upcoming legislative session. This is a short session, so I'm not expecting to see a lot of legislation, mostly tweaks to legislation, but that doesn't mean that there isn't jockeying by some groups to do some really big things. One of the things that's taking up a lot of bandwidth is reform or abolition of Measure 110, which was the measure that decriminalized street drugs. So they're now just a civil penalty, and there's really no incentive to get into the assessment of treatment. Whereas with previous misdemeanor charge level, there was a way to get folks into, especially if they had multiple misdemeanors, into drug treatment court or into some sort of a diversion program where there was treatment. There's a cadre of folks that wants to recriminalize, and there's a cadre of folks that wants to leave it the way it is, but to really focus on improving the treatment detox resources, because even, you know, if we were to recriminalize, we don't have enough resources to actually treat people. So there's a huge discussion and debate going on. The legislature formed a joint committee on this topic, Measure 110 reform. There are a couple of ballot measures that are floating out there, draft ballot measures. And so our membership at counties is divided, although we did take a vote on it yesterday. And by more than 50% of the voting members of the committee decided that we were wanting to be at the table to discuss reforms and not outright repeal. And that was, that's significant, because this is a divisive issue between folks that really want a punishment route and people that want it. A little bit of carrot and stick. The other thing that came up, is that, and on that topic again, it's likely that AOC is going to form some sort of a work group that will include members from the public health and, the Health and Human Services and the Public Safety Steering Committee, because some of what's happened is that, one committee goes off in one direction and one in the other, and then they come to the bigger legislative body, and it all falls apart. So we're trying to deal with that as county commissioners moving into this short session, so that we can speak with one voice, because counties have a huge role in whatever system is created because of the fact that we operate jails, the community corrections, local behavioral health. And a lot of folks that are homeless on the streets and stepped into system. So we want to see if we can be united on this front. The other controversial element that came up yesterday was that the association is trying to change its bylaws to require that candidates for the executive officer positions provide advance notice to membership, so that we know if there's a contested race and people actually show up to the annual meeting. But there is a loud and vocal group of members that don't want to have any kind of notice. They like being able to spring a candidate by surprise. And because what happens is that some of, well, sometimes it's mostly the very busy members from large counties that can't stay for a 4-day, 5-day meeting that tend to leave. And then you've got a much more conservative cohort that's voting for the next set of leaders. It's been a tough topic. And so on that one, there's no consensus, but the group did recommend that we would take this proposed bylaw change, including a 48-hour notice in advance to the membership in November. So expect that for the annual meeting. It will be, again, a very lively conversation. And we'll see where it goes.
And the background to that is, that's how our next president was elected. Only one person that said they were running for, start out as second vice chair. And then at the meeting, there was probably some occasional conversations about how to sneak somebody in, and they did. And that's not, there's a an ongoing tension between more rural conservative counties and counties that are paying the bills.
Yeah.
One vote per county, but the dues are assessed on population.
Well, no, it's not one vote per county for the officers. It's however
No.
many commissioners are in the room from that
No,
county.
but I'm saying for any
Like legislative committee.
procedural, each county has the same authority.
So, yeah, that was interesting. Stay tuned. Please show up for the annual meeting. That's the main message.
And when is the annual meeting?
That is the Thursday of the AOC annual conference. I don't know.
It's in November, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, probably the 17th.
AOC's annual conference is always in November.
The week before Thanksgiving.
13th through the
17th
16th.
through,
Okay.
wrong month.
It was like the 16th.
Okay,
Yep, but meeting starts either evening of the Monday the 13th through the Thursday the 16th.
So we will probably need to cancel our Tuesday, the 14th work session meeting.
yes.
Since we will all be gone.
Either that or reschedule it for Monday, which is I think what we did last year.
Yes, 'cause we don't have any new commissioners that will be busy that morning. We did Tuesday.
And that's a goal setting meeting.
Yes.
Upcoming stuff, I am on the Criminal Justice Council's Justice Reinvestment Review Panel for proposals, so I will be in Salem next Monday for that. I think that means I'm, and then I also have a couple of other commitments. I was invited to give a presentation to the Lynn Housing Authority Board on Tuesday the 17th. And I am going to be participating in a ride along with Dial-A-Bus coming up in a couple of weeks. Rachel's also going to participate in that. And then the Association of Oregon Counties, I was asked if I would attend Youth Behavioral Health Summit. It's going to take place in Eugene on the 2nd of November. It's being organized by Rep. Conrad's staff. They're working towards what kind of reform it would be ideal to measure 110 from the perspective of juvenile involvement with illicit drugs. And I'm hoping to meet with both Matt Witherell and Damien answer that so that I can be as prepared as possible and know what some of their issues are when it comes to youth, substance use disorder. So that's my upcoming 2 weeks.
I guess since you mentioned AOC, I'll talk about, I did attend the Natural Resources Steering Committee meeting. And mainly, so the bulk of that was just amending the guiding principles and priorities that staff talks about. So, you know, they deleted the place-based water policy principles and the associated funding because it's being addressed with places. And then added some pieces about the siting of power, like battery storage, you know. And then there was talk about let's see, oh, just the, you know, there's a question if the RAC, the Rules Advisory Committee, or rule, yeah, it's the rulemaking. Anyway, if counties will be represented on that, and Brandon thinks yes, we'll probably have up to 2 seats, not necessarily county commissioners, but county staff. Just he's been told that there will be some county representation.
For which rule?
For Senate Bill 80, or yes, Senate Bill 80. Just the fire, wildfire.
Oh, okay.
Stuff.
Wildfire mapping. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I will say is I too went to, I didn't go to the ABC House fundraiser that you went to, but I went to a separate one, which is the open house of their actual location in Albany, and that was very insightful, getting to see their actual location. And then they talked a little bit about creating their endowment fund, just so that they can have more predictable funding as time goes on. Yeah. I also wanted to ask Commissioner Boudreau about, you know, you are currently the Corvallis Chamber of Commerce liaison, and are you still enjoying that role?
I am, but if you, when it comes time to rotate, you want to make a shift. I'm open to that.
Sure, I'm missing my friends over at the Corvallis Chamber, so. All right, that's everything.
Okay, I neglected to mention, I went to the AOC Legislative Retreat, Board of Directors Retreat a couple weeks ago in Klamath Falls. One advantage of, and so you're at kind of a resort, and so it's not just a meeting, you see each other other times, and some, I think some of the conflict between larger counties, smaller counties, liberal, conservative, were definitely exacerbated during COVID because it was all meeting online, and there wasn't the chit chat before and after to get to know other commissioners and what they're dealing with. So this kind of format gives a lot of opportunity for that kind of informal conversation, which was good. Friday, discussion of the due structure and AOC's budget, and that's always a challenge. They try to, I think one thing that came out, they try to do too much. They tracked 90 bills, really tracked. And well, we're trying to set priorities. 90. So I think there was clear guidance to reduce that considerably and figure out. Then is the question, well, does this bill affect every county and we can do that, or this bill affects not everybody, but it affects some counties a lot. I'm not positive we answered that, but I think some of that, yes, if it has a significant impact on a number of counties, have that on your list. We spent quite a bit of time. Washington County was asking for and they pay a couple $100,000 a year, something, a large number, whereas another county may pay 5,000. Roughly. And the formula, and it's complicated, and there used to be, well, here's your basic dues, and here's some voluntary things you can contribute to, and that got unwieldy as well. We haven't been doing anything on that. Why am I contributing to it? Or I don't care about that. And so they gradually, I think, merged the voluntary into the general due structure, but it's a complicated formula. Washington County got hit with $20,000 increase. Maybe it was more than that.
Something like that, 24,000, I think.
And said that's too much, or so there was a real discussion and with most counties represented in the discussion. And, well, our county's having a hard time too, and why? But I think the outcome was kind of a compromise. We can cut them some slack. I think they got to postpone dues increase.
And a 4-year payment plan.
It was a interesting discussion. It's going back to some counties pay a lot, may not feel fully represented. And that's guaranteed in this structure. 10 years from now, we'll have the same discussion. But anyway, it was worthwhile. Betty got to see Crater Lake for the first time in her life.
Oh, wow. How? Good.
Because it's more or less on the way.
Yep.
So, good time. It was raining when we came home, but not as much as on the west side. But we're worthwhile and just kind of investment in relationships. Oh, you are a human. I had some doubts.
And we all have one thing in common, which is we love our counties and we want what's best for our county, right?
And everybody, most every meeting gets to say, if you've seen one county, you've seen one county. Golly, we have 36 counties.
I use that, I do.
Yeah. Well, everybody has to, at every meeting, I think it's in the bylaws.
Oh, people understand.
They're very strict.
Good saying.
That's it.
Okay.
Anybody You look like you were ready for,
I'm always happy to say something, but I'll keep my mouth shut.
okay. Last up is other, any other?
Oh, maybe I will just, this close, I just wanted to make you all aware that, still continuing to work with Brenda Downham on compiling the JSUP forum information, lots of information to compile. We're gonna be updating Rachel tomorrow. Give her a debrief on everything JSUP and also the information that's coming out, but the plan would be to have that at your November 14th goal setting, to have a discussion.
You mean the 13th?
No, November 13th, sorry. So I just wanted to let you know that's still on the radar, having also known some very important discussion for all of us. And I think you're gonna have a lot of information.
Yeah.
But again, we'll brief Rachel tomorrow on that.
Thank you. Need my gavel. Meeting adjourned.
There you go.
Which I- Yeah. Didn't get pretty close. I believe this was a 3 hour.
3 hours.
We're ahead of us, half hour ahead. Obviously, the times are estimates.
Yeah.